Can you hear me okay? Is it good? Yeah, it sounds good. I'm always pleased and grateful every time Monsignor Torgensen calls me, invites me to come back here again. To let you know, I'll be giving the same Contemplative Lenten reflections next weekend at Loyola University from 9 till noon. I say that so you don't see it and go and say, we heard this already. But because it's poetic, you might want to hear it. So just so you know that. I think also this is being recorded, and later you want to listen to it. You have access to it, I believe. Good. First, the schedule. We're here till noon. We might not be here that long. We might end sooner. But I'm going to give this first session for about 40 minutes. And then we'll stand. Could somebody close that back door? Where's all the wind coming? Oh, it's from here. Does someone close that? Is that possible or not? If not, we're okay. The schedule. I'm going to give a first session here. It'll be about 40 minutes, and then we'll stand and stretch in silence for about 1 minute, which is optional. Then I'll ring the bell, and we'll sit for 5 minutes in meditation. And then we'll open it up for dialogue on how this touches you personally. And then there'll be a break. Some may choose just to sit in here. You can go out into the courtyard and walk around. I'll come out and fetch you when the time comes. I'll ring the bell. And then there'll be a second conference on prayer, applying this to prayer and to daily life. This way. I might also say here that what I want to share here today is the big picture. It's like the whole thing this way. And I think it's good to hear this about Lent and Jesus and so on, like poetically the vision. And then how this settles in our life at home day by day, like how we live this vision. And so I'll begin then. While we're in Lent, we're invited to enter into a reflective, prayerful exploration of the gifts and the miracles offered to us in Holy Week, in the suffering and in the death and in the resurrection of Jesus. And I think a way to start to look at this experientially is to say that if in Jesus, if we see that God in Jesus, what? Can you turn it up the volume higher? Can you turn the volume up higher? Is there a volume? Is there a sound person here? Okay. Raise your hand if you're having a hard time hearing me. Yeah. This is challenging enough when you can hear it. So, is there somebody here that handles this? I don't know if I can yell for 3 hours. Do you know what I mean? What? Well, maybe I have this on wrong. No, there's no volume. It's just on and on. Is it okay?
Let me see if I can get it closer to you. Is that closer to you?
Let's see if that works. Is that any better? He's a star. Very good, thank you. So here's the reflection. If we see that God in Jesus entered into and becomes one with our suffering, it means that our suffering enters into and is one with God. That God is present and one with us in our suffering. And if in the death of Jesus, we see that God in Jesus entered into our death, it means that our death enters into the death of Jesus. And we also see that in the darkness of the death of Jesus, the light of the resurrection shines. That is to say, that we're eternal, that we're all eternal. Our body dies, but all of us are eternal this way. And so what we're trying to explore here is how can we prayerfully and experientially discover in the reflections on Holy Week the eternality of ourself. That is, what is it in us that never passes away, that's endlessly ribboned through everything endlessly passing away? In other words, this morning together is already passing away, clock's ticking, and we'll have lunch. See? But what is being shared here in this morning that's passing away, that's being bodied forth, is that which never passes away, because it's eternal, because you're the beloved this way. And this is Jesus. That Jesus invites us to an experiential realization of the eternality of ourselves this way. I want to share how at the monastery, one way that I learned this, I had an opportunity not just to study under Thomas Merton, but I also studied the philosophical theology of the Middle Ages, St. Thomas Aquinas, and St. Bonaventure and Duns Scotus and Augustine. Those people had a big effect on me, really. So I'd like to share one part of this that touched me a lot. That before creation, there was no capacity for love in God. Because God is Octus Plurissimus. God's the infinity of love. If you have a glass on a table and you're pouring water into the glass and it's overflowing, there's no capacity for water in the glass. And so there's no capacity for love in God, because God's the overflowing infinity of love. And therefore, God so needs to share himself. God so needs to give the infinity of himself. God creates a capax Dei. God creates a person that's the capacity that can receive the infinity of God. See, it's God's destiny for us, and that's you. To be a person is to be a capacity for God. That the infinite love of God creates you as the beloved, who God can infinitely pour the infinity of God into as the fulfillment and destiny in your destiny. And that's who you are. See? Then God makes this capacity real, because it's a capacity that needs to be actual, being real by living it. And so God creates us on this earth in time and space. See? God creates us on this earth in time and space, and God gives us a nature. So in the poetic story of the Garden of Eden, in the Garden of Eden, you have Adam and Eve, as capacities for God. And then God gives them a human nature. Now, when we think of human nature, I think we tend to think of logic and science and art and it is all of that. It's culture. We're using it right now. This is our nature. But the deepest thing in the nature is the capacity to recognize the person. That the nature of Adam and Eve, the man and woman walking around in Adam and Eve, their nature was luminous with the transsubjective oneness with God this way. And they had the capacity to see that. And secondly, God gave them the freedom. Because love is never forced, it's always offered. God gave them the freedom to say yes to the divinity of themselves. Because in the reciprocity of love, destiny is fulfilled. See, in love, infinite love gives itself as the mystery of us. Then God's waiting for us to give ourselves in love to the love that's giving itself to us. Praise the Lord. See, this way. And that's the mystery of freedom. In AA, they talk about self-will run riot. The mystery of the fall is trying to be like God without God. They were like God. Let us make the human person in our image and likeness. But in trying to be like God without God is the fall, and we're stuck in that. See? The person that you are See, let us create the human person in our image and likeness. In the tradition, the image of God is the person that you are. Thomas Merton once said, it's that in you that belongs completely to God. You can't, it isn't subject to the brutalities of our own will. No matter what you try to do to it, you can't do anything to it because it's that in you that belongs completely to God. It's sovereign and absolute. See, that's the image of God. The likeness is the nature that realizes it, and that's what's broken. So that in our broken nature, there's this kind of traumatized capacity to experientially see the divinity of ourselves and to say yes to it. So Jesus says in the Gospels. He says, you have eyes to see and you do not see. There is your God-given capacity to see your God-given godly nature right now, and you don't see it. This is the source of all your fear. This is the source of all your sorrow. This is the source of all your confusion. This is the source of all the traumatizing things you do to yourself and to each other and to the earth. See? And so the prayer is, Lord, that I might see. What if right now we could all close our eyes, and with our eyes closed, we could be interiorly awakened, so that when we opened our eyes, we'd see through our own awakened eyes what Jesus saw and all that he saw. What would we see? We'd see God, because Jesus saw God in all that he saw. What's really stunning about it when you prayerfully sit with the Gospels is that it didn't matter whether Jesus saw his own mother or a prostitute. It didn't matter whether he saw the joy of those gathered at a wedding or the sorrow of those gathered at the burial of a loved one. It didn't matter whether he saw his own disciples or his executioners. It didn't matter whether he saw a flower or a bird. Jesus saw God in all that he saw this way. So right now when God sees you sitting here, do you know what God sees when God sees you sitting here? God. See, God says, look, I created you in my image and likeness. You remind me of me. What's not to like? Seriously, good Lord. This is the divinity of who you are and your nothingness without me. See, you're worth, by the generosity of God, you're worth all that God is worth. Meister Eckhart says that we think of God as generosity. We are the generosity of God. We're the song that God sings, and we don't see it. See? And so, and this is true of all the world religions. Each religion has its own genius for saying this, but I'm saying it here in the mother tongue of my own Christian faith. Jesus is God's response to us in our dilemma. Because in Jesus, we see that when God sees our suffering, we're roaming around in this realm of being exiled from the divinity of ourself. And so when love touches suffering, the suffering turns love into mercy. And so what we see in Jesus is that in Jesus, love descends as low as it needs to go to find and to meet and to be with and for us in our brokenness. This is Jesus. It doesn't say the Word became humanity and dwelt among us. It says the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and the flesh is the broken place. Jesus came to walk with the broken place. The world that God so loved that he sent his only begotten Son is this broken world. And it's pretty broken. Turn on the evening news. It's a broken place. God's infinitely in love with the brokenness of this world. And here's why, this way. And this runs all through the Gospels. This is Holy Week, this everything. God sees, yes, there is brokenness. There is. There's brokenness in you, there's broken. We are the world. There is brokenness. But Jesus also saw that we're so caught up in the brokenness it closes off experiential access to the divinity of ourself. It's always there because it's sovereign and absolute. That is, we're so taken by the broken places. We'll put it another way. We're so taken by the idolatry of conditioned states, namely limping along, trying to do our best, that we think we're nothing but the self things happen to. And so what happens in the meeting of Jesus in the stories of the Gospels this way is that Jesus meets the person in their brokenness. And I'd like to reflect on the healing stories in the Gospels. In a way, each one's unique, but in a way, they're all the same. And each one's about us. Jesus spent whole nights in prayer. He who sees me sees the Father. And he came out into the morning light, walking the earth, seeking to set people free from suffering. When the word got out, the suffering came to him. I can't walk. I can't see. I become a prostitute. I have leprosy. I become a tax collector and gone off to the Roman rights and so on. My daughters died, etc., etc., etc. And Jesus listens to the suffering. He hears it. And he responds in an extraordinary way. The lame walk, the blind see, the lepers cured, the daughter who died is raised from the dead, Lazarus, the friend, is raised from the dead. See, that's the miracle. And then Jesus says this, I did this that you might believe the true miracle. And here's the true miracle. And this is personal in our heart. We have to say it poetically. Jesus is standing there, and the person's right there in front of him who's just been healed. They can see or they can walk or whatever. This is between them. Jesus says, I know you. From before the origins of the universe, God the Father contemplated you in me, hidden with Christ in God before the origins of the world. And since God has never not known who you are in me, you have no beginning. You're beginningless as God, because God has eternally known who you eternally are. This way. And the you in me, in God, that God has never known. God will never not know who you are in me, and therefore you're eternal. You're eternal. In the fleeting fragility of your existence, there shines bright the eternality, the God-given godly nature of yourself, precious as God is precious, heartbeat by heartbeat, breath by breath, and reflected in his eyes, they see their true face. This is experiential salvation, really. You know, they all had to go home and live their life. They're all dead now, by the way. They're all dead. Who knows what they went through? I mean, seriously. When Lazarus was raised from the dead, he was raised from the dead because he had to die again later. He's dead too. Someday, 100 years from now, every one of us in here will be dead. Seriously. 1,000 years from now, every one of us in here will have been dead for 1,000 years. See? And we'll cross over into the anonymity of the dead. So I hope this talk is clear now. We need to be precise. It's passing away. This morning is passing away. But can I discover in the morning that's passing away that which never passes away? The infinity of myself and the love of God taking me to itself unexplainably forever in my heart this way. Like that. Soren Kierkegaard, a Christian existentialist. Kierkegaard talks about the leap of faith. He said, you come to the edge of yourself, like the edge of your abilities, the edge of your boundaries. See? And you make this leap of faith. And he says, in the free fall, you're caught by Christ. And reflected in his eyes, you see your true face. There's no fear there. This way, like this. Now, I think that there are moments in our life where we fleetingly taste this. Seriously. In moments of intimacy with, of deep love with someone. I want to give an image on, I'm going to use marital love, but also this could be friend, child, grandmother, grandfather, reading a child a good night story, whatever. I'm going to use marital love. In the Turning to the Mystics podcast, we're doing St. Teresa of Lisieux right now, so she's in me right now, so I'll share this. When you look at the beloved's face, think of someone you love very, very much. When you look at the beloved's face, the face you see is the same face that everybody else sees. But in your love for them, you see in their face the preciousness of who they are as the beloved that graces your life. See, this way. There's a thinker I like very much, Jean-Luc Marion. And he says, he said the face of the beloved seen in love, he calls it saturated phenomena. The face of the beloved is saturated with the delightful, unexplainable holiness that graces your life. It's ineffable. It's delightfully unexplainable. See, isn't it true the more deeply we love somebody, the less inclined we would be to claim that we could find words that could do justice to the love that blesses us? Isn't that true? And God is love. Likewise, when you love somebody, child, mother, brother, sister, whatever, see, the love state of consciousness is saturated consciousness. It's saturated with the intimate realization of what you can't explain. Thomas Merton once said in the monastery, he said, there are certain things in life we simply have to accept as true, or we go crazy inside. And they're the very things we can't explain to anybody, including ourselves. You know, Dan Walsh in philosophy class once said, he said, I know it, I know it, I know that I know it. The trouble is, it's I who know that I know it. And when I try to tell you what I know, I don't know what to say, which makes giving this talk an interesting experience. Because notice, I'm not explaining anything. Have you noticed? I've not explained a blessed thing. You know why? It's not explainable. But it is intimately realizable. And this is faith. This way. Like this. We're looking for a language that bears witness and embodies and carries forward the unexplainable immediacy of the deathless mystery of who we are as the beloved of God. This way. You see? And so there are always moments where we realize this, but you know what life is like. It slips away. You know, the cell phone goes off this way. Sometimes I get the feeling, too, another way that I look at this is you get the feeling that in just trying to keep up with the day's demands, you know what life is like. You get this feeling that you're skimming over the surface of the depth of your own life, that you're suffering from depth deprivation. And what's especially regrettable is God's unexplainable oneness with you is hidden in the depths over which you're skimming, which makes mornings like this together so extraordinary. This way, to slow it I'm a clinical psychologist, retired. I used to work with trauma. A lot of therapy with a therapist is being in the presence of someone who keeps inviting you at the feeling level to stop and listen to what you just said. Sometimes we walk right past what we're looking for this way. And so it's slowing everything down to be more habitually established in that alone which is sovereign and ultimately real, which is the love. See, Martin Heidegger has this lovely image about the horizon. He said the horizon at one point is the point beyond which you can't see is the horizon. But there's another way to look at the horizon. The horizon is the point at which the unmanifested is manifesting itself. So the palms of your own hands are God's horizon. See? What's the divinity of standing up and sitting down this way? There are moments this comes to us. Thomas Merton, in the last chapter of New Seeds of Contemplation, he says, the world and time are the dance of the Lord in emptiness. The silence of the spheres is the music of a wedding feast. See, this is the divinity of the world. And he says, we do not have to go very far to catch echoes of that dance. And he gives some examples. He says, when we're out walking alone in the midst of nature, and you turn to see a flock of birds. Oh dear, is it okay? Can you still hear me? Okay. And you're walking along, and you turn to see a flock of birds descending. And as if out of the corner of your eye, you catch something in their descent that's primordial, vast, and true. See, I want to put it further in faith. You sense intuitively that God's the infinity of the bird's descent. And the bird's descent is the incarnate presence of God. God's the infinity of you seeing the divinity of their descent. And you seeing it is the incarnate presence of God. It's blessedness unto you this way. These moments of which I speak can be quite powerful, really. Sometimes when quite young, we can be granted a quickening we spend the rest of our life learning to be faithful to. But often, very often, they're subtle. They're very, very subtle. They're very delicate, like a whisper this way. You can be reading a child a good night story, and when you look down into the child's upturned face, you know that being in the presence of the child, you're in the presence of God. Because the infinite love of God is the infinity of that child's presence, and that child's presence is the incarnate immediacy of God. And you seeing in the child's upturned face the presence of God, God's the infinite love that empowers you to see it, and you seeing it is God, is the divinity of God. I know it, I know it, I know that I know it. I cannot explain it this way. This comes in so many different ways. The quiet hour at day's end, lying in the dark, listening to your own breathing in the middle of the night. It's the way of poets. It's the way of musicians. It's the way of artists as visual mystics. Every creative act. It's every act in which you're invited to give yourself to somebody or to a community, and you know that as you give yourself, you receive a lot more back than you're giving. And God's the infinity of that. Like the blessedness of this. And even painful things, sitting at the deathbed of a dying loved one. Or even, I say this too in psychotherapy, sometimes you can be in the midst of a long process of walking through trauma. And even though you're very in the midst of unprocessed healing, you can begin to experience a quiet light sustaining you in the midst of the unresolved. Isn't this true? Isn't it true that whatever you know today about fragility or about grace or about amazement, how often, I know it's true of me, you learned it in the dark. Maybe in the mystery you had lost your way in your own life this way. And you serendipitously stumbled into something. See, that found you there. Mercy, mercy unto mercy unto mercy this way. And so we're always talking then about these moments. And so this really then, in the suffering of Jesus, Jesus, in the healing stories, Jesus sees that our suffering, the foundations of suffering, aren't the conditions of our suffering. I mean, the conditions of suffering are real. Terminal illness and pain and the death of a loved one, and you know what life is like. It's there. It is real. But the foundations of suffering is falling into the belief that the conditioned state that you're in has the final say in who you are. Because down into the depths of that conditioned state is the presence of God, see, quietly sustaining you and guiding you and walk. You can't see it when you're shooting the rat. That's what trauma is. What is trauma? See, we can withstand anything as long as the boundary, as long as there's a place inside of us that can face the trauma, we can withstand it. Where it really gets scary is where the invasive loss finds the center of ourselves, and we disappear into the trauma. That's trauma, really. And the only response to someone in trauma is, I'm so deeply sorry that you have to go through this, so they can see they're not alone this way, to find our way out this way. And so the suffering of Jesus is to see that the foundations of suffering is not that there isn't the suffering, but the intensity of the suffering closes off experiential access to the sovereignty of the love that's sustaining us in the suffering this way. The parables of Jesus in different ways are all about this. The parable of the prodigal son. Was it the reading for today? I don't know. There was mass when I walked in. Was it the reading for, was that the prodigal son? That's pretty good. Oh my God, I said, I want to talk about that in my talk today. So here's the prodigal son. All the parable about it. We all know this story. There was a person of great wealth who had two sons. And one son, much to the father's sadness, demanded on being given his inheritance. The father gives him his inheritance, and he goes off and that's one meaning of the word prodigal. It means squander. He squandered tragically this way. And in all of it, he lost a lot when he lost his inheritance. See, he also lost his sense of self, his sense of bearing. How could I have been so foolish? And so he goes back to the father thinking, what I did, I could see the pain in my father's eyes when I walked away. I have no right to think he'd ever take me back. But maybe if I could coax him into letting me live in a tent behind the garage, if I'm lucky. See? And he's walking back memorizing his lines, what he's going to say. And here what the story is, here the father doesn't even wait till he gets back, because every day the father's been sitting looking at the road waiting for his son to come back. And Jesus is saying, this is what God's like. And he tells the servants to begin a great feast. And he rushes out on the road, slips a ring on his son's finger, hugs him tight, and the son is trying to stammer out his excuses for what he did. But the father doesn't need to hear it. Do you know why? It's irrelevant. Do you know why it's irrelevant? Because the infinity of God's love for you in brokenness is oceanic in all directions. The sole measure of God's love for us is not the extent that we can live up to who we think we should be. The sole measure is the measure of the expanse of the love of God given to us in our wayward ways. This is the gift of tears. This is the gift of gratitude. And this is experiential salvation for us this way. By the way, the son who stayed home says, Dad, you didn't put on a feast for me. I've been here all along. And he says, listen, I'm so grateful you're here. It's so unfortunate. By the way, what your brother did, was it stupid? Yeah. Was it regrettable? Yes. Did I suffer because of it? Yes. But I love him so. And I don't love you because you stayed here, because if you'd leave, I'd still love you too. We're powerless to do anything to stop God being infinitely in love with us this way. It's really true like this. Jesus, in one of his parables, he talks about someone who found a pearl of great price hidden in a field. And he said he sold everything he had to make it his. See? So what is the pearl of great price? The pearl of great price is the invincible preciousness of yourself, see, in your brokenness. See? Indestructible, sovereign, absolute, and pure. See? And what is it to sell everything you have? To sell everything you have is to give up. See, anything you're capable of attaining or losing is infinitely less than what alone will consummate the longings of your heart. That's the thing. If you're even capable of attaining it or capable of losing it, it's infinitely less than what alone will consummate. Because God, it's a setup. God says, here's the reason. I'm going to set this up in such a way that nothing less than your infinite union with the infinity of me will be enough to put to rest the restless longings of your heart. See? And so what we're really giving up then, I think, in Lent and all this, is we're giving up the idolatry of conditioned states over the infinite love that utterly transcends and permeates the very conditions that we're in. And I'd like to bring this home, now to something. You know, you all came home. You all came here today from your home. I came from mine. And when you leave here, you're going to go back home. And there's things that are going on at home in your life, in your heart. Love found and love lost. Fragilities, gifts, injustices, hurts. The scariness of the unresolved. You know what it's like. For 30 years, I was a psychotherapist. I hadn't listened to it all day. I know what it's like. That's right. So here's the question for all of us. See, how can I, in this prayerful reflection on Jesus, find in my own living room, in the midst of the fragmented details of my heart, this love that's sustaining me so here, this way, in my home. You know, an image, I'll end with this image. Imagine you're driving home at the end of the day, and you're out along a country road somewhere, and the sun is setting. And you don't think anything of it. It sets every night. But this particular night is very eloquent this way. And so you pull the car over, get out of the car, go down a little embankment. You sit on the ground, and here's the thing. You give yourself over to the beauty of the setting sun giving itself over to you. That's the thing. And notice something, too. Notice that as you sit this way, you're not in time. Notice that's why when you get up, you have to look and see. You know what I mean? You're not in time this way. Giving yourself over to the beauty of the setting sun, giving itself over to you, and you get in your car. You stop and get some groceries. You pull in your driveway. You get out of your house, out of the car, get your mail, go in the kitchen, take out the trash. Come back, and you're standing in your own kitchen going through the mail. And you remember the moment of sitting out in the presence of the setting sun, and you ask, here's the seeker's question. Why do I spend so many of my waking hours trapped on the inner circumference of the outer richness of the life that I'm living? I know it's there because I tasted it. See? Not just in the setting sun, in the arms of the beloved, in the quiet hour, in the dark, in the creative moment, in giving ourselves over to the smell of a blood-red rose. It gave itself to me. I will not play the cynic. I will not doubt my awakening heart. See? But why do I let the centrifugal force of the day's demands spin me out and away from this unity of love that alone is ultimately real? And it's absolutely, as a matter of fact, it's even permeating my confusion and my brokenness this way. It's like that. I think we all have moments like this. What happens with some people is the desire to abide there. And this is path talk. I glimpsed something within my heart that having glimpsed it, I know without it my life will be forever incomplete. I also get a feeling that in these glimpses, the setting sun, the goodnight story with the child, the long, slow walk to no place in particular, whatever. See? I also know that in these glimpses, it's not that something more was given to me, but a curtain opened, and the divinity of every moment touched my heart, including this moment. See? So how can I be healed from what experientially exiles from the infinite generosity of love pouring itself out and giving itself to me just as I am? Thomas Merton was said in the monastery. He says, I believe I've discovered the only way I'm ever going to be at peace is to accept myself as I am, because there's very little chance I'm ever going to be anybody else. And God's not waiting for me to reach some goal to love me. God's infinitely in love with me in the midst of my wayward ways. Thomas Merton used to say in the monastery, is there a Christian in the house? Raise your hand. See, this is the good news of Jesus Christ. It's hard to find people who believe it. I mean, in their heart. See, but we believe, and so this is really why we're here. And I want to say something else then, and we're going to stop here and do a sit and have a dialogue. Is the very fact that you were drawn to be here and came here, and the very fact people are listening on the internet, bears witness that you're already on the path of which I speak. See? In other words, the very desire, the sincerity of the desire, is itself the love that's given to you as an echo of God's desire for you. And that's why we're here. This is ecclesia. This is the church. This is the beloved community. This way, like this. So let's do this. Would you do me a favor and get my bell out of my bag so I don't have to get up? Listen, this is optional. Let's all stand in silence. If you want to, just to stretch for a minute. Was a striker there? You see the striker? Oh, it'd be great if the striker wasn't here. Is it there? Oh, it is here. Good. Okay, let's be seated. And I have a thought. Listen, I'm going to ring the bell once, and we're going to sit in silence for about 5 minutes. And I encourage you to do this. The way I've been speaking here, what strikes you about it? See? And what is it that's been shared here that realizes that some way I've been putting words to something that you've experienced? Likewise, what have I shared here that you maybe are saying, it sounds beautiful, really, but honest to God, I'm in a place right now, I just don't, you know what I mean? I just, it's like this with me, this way. And I was hoping when I came here this morning to be like this, I might have it. Here's another way I would put it. There's that in us that understands this. And there's that in us that doesn't understand it yet. The part that doesn't understand it is this part that still gets reactive. Still thinks how something turns out determines how we are. And the part that understands this is to be endlessly tender-hearted toward the part that doesn't understand it. And that's Jesus. See? We're to be like Jesus towards ourselves by being endlessly tender-hearted toward the part that doesn't understand it. See? Precious, 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 precious in its wayward ways. See? Beloved of God in the brokenness. So in that spirit then, I'll ring the bell. We'll sit for 5 minutes. I'll ring the bell. And let's do this too. I'll do the liturgy of the body too. We'll bow. Okay. The Soto Zen master Shunryu Suzuki says that when we bow, we give ourselves up. If ever you get to a place in life where the only thing you can do is bow, you should do it. As contemplative women and contemplative men, the least we can do together is bow in communal gratitude for being here together in the presence of this mystery, of this love that is the reality of our life. So I invite you to sit straight, fold your hands, and bow. and bow. Usually they have a microphone here. Is that microphone, is that on? Does that work? Does it work? Oh, good. Set it right there in front of me. Thank you so much. Oh, that's perfect. Thanks so much. Thank you. Here's how I do this. Here's how I do it. This reflection that I just shared, if there's anything that's not clear, you're laughing, hurting my feelings. If there's something, here's the thing. This is universally intimate. It's endlessly evocative because it touches your life. See, what about this and what like that? So if you have a question, here's how I do this. If you'd come up here to the microphone and ask me the question, talk loud enough that I can actually hear you talking to me, but everyone will hear you over the microphone. Okay? And then I'll give a response. So this will be like an open-ended dialogue where this touches people wherever they might be. So if there's any questions or observations or anything, feel free to come forward.
You spoke of the saturation of love a couple of times,
Yeah.
and I didn't catch the first area where you spoke about it with Jesus, and then towards the end you spoke about it again of the middle section.
Yeah, let me go over that again.
Thank you.
Okay, let me go over that again. There's a theologian, he's a Catholic theologian at the University of Chicago named Jean-Luc Marion. And he wrote a book called Revelation and Givenness, I think it is. He's a brilliant Catholic theologian on Revelation and so on. So this is his language. He's difficult, by the way. He's dense. Here's the image. When you love someone very much and you see their face, you see the face that everybody else sees. But in your love for them, when you see the face of the beloved, lover, spouse, brother, sister, son, daughter, mother, father, grandfather, grandmother, whoever, just someone that you love very much. In your love for them, you see in their face the miracle of their presence that graces your life. See? In your love for them, see, be with me. Be with me. It's a mystery. And therefore their face is saturated phenomena. That is, it's saturated with the unexplainable immediacy of the soulful presence of the beloved. See? Next step. The state of consciousness, which is, we're going later when we talk about prayer, love consciousness, that state of consciousness in which you see the saturated phenomena of their face, that state of consciousness is saturated consciousness. That is, it's saturated with the intimate realization of what cannot be explained. See, I can't explain it. See, but I know it in my heart. I know it because love shines and shimmers in it, and it gives itself to me. Saturated phenomena. So we would say this way, he extends it further, that Jesus is the saturated phenomena of God present in a person this way. And likewise, what empowers us to see in Jesus the presence of God is the saturated phenomena of the gift of our faith. I want to say also in relationships too then. When the person you love loves you, see, when you love the person this way, you reveal them to themselves as precious. See, really. But likewise, if they love you, reciprocity of love, they reveal you to yourself by letting you know they see in your face what they see in their love for you, which is the preciousness of you, which cannot be explained, each unto each. Hence the gift of friendship, the gift of intimacy. And I want to take it another step then. See, it isn't just this relationship interpersonal, but it's interpersonal. There's the relationship with myself. See, what is the relationship with myself? This way. See, when I say myself, who's the self of myself? The self of myself is the self that I see, so I can say I'm ashamed of myself, I'm proud of myself, I'm worried about myself. The self of myself. But if that's the self of myself, who's the my of myself? That is, who's the me who sees me? At one level, the my of myself is the internalized self of myself. I internalize ideas and images, and I project it onto things. But when I sit in meditative states, the my of myself is none distinguished from the infinite presence of God, presencing itself and giving itself to me as a gift of my presence, which is prayer, is contemplation, this way, like this, I think. Anyone else with anything?
Thank you so much for being here. I was struck by the centrifuge of how is my quest to get out of the centrifuge or to bring the sunset into the centrifuge. I feel like my centrifuge is so work and family, and so to find time, do you stretch out the sunset?
No. Yeah, the centrifuge. You know the centrifuge? You know what life's like at home? There's a centrifuge being caught up in the momentum of the endless details of what your life's made of your life, my life's made of mine. See? It's like if you're not careful, you can be too busy to be. See? And not only that, not only are you too busy to be, but even when there's nothing to do, you're distracted. It isn't as if you're sitting there in your own living room feeling the divinity of your living room. You just notice you got to vacuum the carpet. And that's the centrifuge. It's like we're kind of trapped on this one-dimensional surface of ourselves. And in the next talk, I'm going to talk about that as prayer. I want to talk about that. But I want to give a shorter version right now. This way. I want to give it as I'll give an example. Let's say you're sitting in your own living room, and it's a room you see it every day. It's your living room. But what is it to say that I know that God's present here now, closer to me than I am to myself, here in my living room? And in what sense is the configuration of the furniture in this room like a divine pattern, the sofa, the chair, the couch, the table? To what sense is the configuration or the pattern of the furniture a kind of a mandala or a certain sacredness this way? Have you ever been, I used to visit my grandmother, and she was widowed. Her husband committed suicide, and she lived alone. And she cherished, there was a lot of abuse going on at home and violence and so on. And I used to just love sitting with her alone in her home, cherishing the ordinariness of her home. And what we would do, I was in high school. All this trauma was going on, and I was planning to go to the monastery, and it was crazy. And what we would do is we would drink a cup of constant comment tea out of a teacup that was her wedding china. I remember there was a little rose in the bottom of each cup. And we would roll cigarettes. She would make her own cigarettes. You know, you put it in the little roller. And we'd puff on the cigarettes and tell dirty jokes and sip tea. And she loved me. See? And I can see her living room to this day, the pattern of it. And sometimes, too, if you see a picture of something like that, how you cherish the pattern this way. And I was given, when she died, I was given a teaspoon from her silverware set. It was a butter knife, and it was very old and so on. And so in a way, what do you do with it? You could throw it out. I mean, it's just an old butter knife. But if you would throw it out, there'd be like a procession with incense for the holiness of useless things, reverencing it. But you don't throw it out. You cherish it and keep it there. Why? It's precious unto you. See? So how can I learn to sensitize, and the next talk will be about prayer. How can I learn to sensitize myself to the depth dimension that transcends and permeates the centrifuge? So we'll talk about strategies for that also. I think. Let's see if there's one more. Does anyone else have anything? You can do after him. We'll do two more. Go ahead.
Thank you, Jim. This one is about, I think you said something to the effect of, like if I have a longing in my heart, it's an echo of God's longing for me. Let's say if I had, longing for, say, love, or longing for freedom or peace, or maybe I had a sense of loneliness in my heart, or there's some sort of stirring or longing. This is an echo of God's longing for me, and that this other is kind of connected to our hearts will not rest, O Lord, until they rest in Thee. Maybe you could expand on that a little.
Yes, about longing for God and longing. See, there is a longing for fulfillment. There is. What we're trying to understand is how is the fulfillment that we're looking for, which is God, how is it present in the longing? That the longing itself is the presence of God, incarnate in your longing. And there's something else, too, I think. The reason you're longing is that the fulfillment you're hoping for is not yet there. Because if it was, you wouldn't be longing. But is it also true that the fulfillment that's not yet there is the presence of God that's present in what's not yet there? Because the not yet there is the waiting. See, how can I learn not to do violence to the preciousness of my waiting? Because my waiting is saturated phenomena of an echo of God waiting for me. And when the waiting gets very, very deep, there's nothing missing in it. This way, I think. We have one more we were going to get to.
At one of these talks once, I came up to ask a question.
Oh, turn the mic more towards your mouth.
Is
Lower
this
it a
okay?
little bit. Someone.
Okay. Is this okay?
What is it?
So I came to ask you a question one time at one of these events before.
Yeah.
And I came up and I looked you in the eye, and what I felt, I didn't have any questions anymore.
Yeah.
But if I walk around in the world like that, it's like a turtle with no shell, you know? So it's not just how do I abide in that, but how can I survive in this world in that? Because the tremendous sensitivity.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. This is very good. I used to give retreats up at a retreat house up in San Francisco. It's closed now. It was a beautiful retreat house. It was gorgeous. And there was a Jesuit priest there who was also a Zen sensei. He was a Zen master, Jesuit priest. And so there was a Catholic Zen Sendo there, Zen Center. And I've been deeply touched by Zen too through Merton, Zazen, and so on. And so anyway, I was giving a retreat up there. And there were a lot of nuns were there at my retreat. And at the end, one nun raised her hand. And she said, a lot of sisters here, they've known me for years. She said, they know I'm not an emotional person. But for some reason, when I listen for you, I want to cry. She said, and I said to her, just to let you know, when I'm talking, I want to cry. You know why? Because the heart can't bear what cannot be comprehended. It like washes over us and touches us. That's why when we receive the Eucharist, we receive Holy Communion. We don't receive Holy Communication. See? And the Holy Communion, and so this is the gift of tears. See? Sometimes it is literally tears. See? But it's the gift of tears. It isn't as if you look in the mirror and you say, God loves me, but what's not to love? It's being loved without foundations. There's no basis within yourself to account for God being infinitely in love with you. And when it touches you, it's somatic. When it touches you, and deep meditation practices like this we're going to be talking about. It's the quietness of your whole body this way. And so the gift of tears, it's the gift of liberation and endlessness. And really, it's almost tears. Is almost the gift of tears embody the end of sorrow. See? Because they're like tears of joy or tears of releasement or tears of, it's kind of like that, I think, really. So let's do this. It's 10 o'clock. How about a 15-minute break? How would that be? 20 minutes? So you can just sit in here, or you can go out into the courtyard and walk about. And in 15 minutes, I'll come out with the bell gong, and we'll come back in and do a round 2. Okay. So stay here if you want to, or head out there and walk around. I don't know if there's coffee out there or not. But I have a thought. Can you hear me now if I do this? I'm going to do this, because this thing is driving me crazy. see. Hi, hi. Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
Godsend. Thank you so much. Cold? Okay, shall we start again? Can you hear me? She showed me how to do this. I want to talk about prayer. Let's say that there are moments in our life where we're graced with the sensitivities that we're talking about here. But these grace moments of awareness, they tend to be fleeting. They tend to be fleeting. And as they pass away, even though there lingers the desire to abide there, we're powerless to make these moments happen. We can't generate our own moments. I mean, some people do with mood-altering substances, but that's a whole different story. So here's what prayer is. When I say prayer first, prayer, meditation, is any act faithfully entered into with your whole heart that takes you to the deeper place. We were mentioning them before. And I don't think we choose these. We kind of find like a resonance with us. The long, slow walk to no place in particular. The quiet hour at day's end. Getting up before dawn. And sitting in the dark, the unrelenting sovereignty of the emergence of a new day. This way. Being present and vulnerable in the presence of that person in whose presence we're taken to the deeper place. This way. To be quietly and patiently attentive to unresolved suffering in our heart, or the suffering of a loved one, in a kind of an attentiveness to them. This way. I think also, the Zen master Dogen, he says, find that person whose words awaken your heart with a desire for the great way, then forget everything else. That person is your teacher. Thomas Merton once said in the monastery, there are certain writers that ring your bell, that you want to underline it, because they're helping you put words to your own heart. That's your teacher. This way. So for me, Thomas Merton was 18 years old. I tell this story. I was in the 9th grade. The trauma was horrible at home. And I was in a Catholic high school in Akron, Ohio. And one of the instructor there mentioned monasteries. I'd never heard of monasteries before. And I understood him to say monasteries are places where people go to seek and find and give themselves to God, who's wholly given to us in each passing moment of our life, on up to and including the moment of our death and beyond. And they believe in the monastery, their quiet fidelity to that journey reaches out and touches the whole world in ways we don't understand. Thomas Merton, in his journal in the monastery, The Sign of Jonas, he had insomnia, and he's lying in his bed, and he says, suddenly the bed becomes an altar, and in a distant city, someone is suddenly able to pray. He said, perhaps the people whose lives we will touch the most deeply are people we won't meet till after we are dead. The interconnectedness, the transspatial reality of our love for ourselves and for each other this way. And he mentioned Thomas Merton. I'd never heard of Thomas Merton. And he said he graduated from Columbia University. As a young man, entered the monastery, the Abbey of Gethsemane in Kentucky, wrote his autobiography, The Seventh Story Mountain. It went on the New York Times bestsellers list. And he said, Thomas Merton to this day is writing books from the cloister that's touching the lives of thousands of people. So that day I went up to the high school library, and they had one book by Thomas Merton, The Sign of Jonas. And on the very first page, I was 14 years old, Thomas Merton says, as for me, I have but one desire, the desire for solitude, to be lost in the secret of God's face. And at 14 years old, I didn't know what that meant, but something in me said, me too. If he would have said something theological, I don't think it would have touched me. But he was so transparent about his longing, it accessed the longing in me that I didn't know was there this way. And I got my own copy of The Sign of Jonas, and for the 4 years of high school, the violence got worse. It sustained me, and I felt God was calling me to the monastery. And I went. When I graduated from high school, I was there for 6 years, changed my life, cloistered monastic life. And Thomas Merton once said in the monastery, he said, monastic life is very carefully designed to cultivate this oneness. But there are people living in the world who are being called to it, and they have no one to help them to understand what's happening to them. See? And when I left the monastery, I found that was true, and that's why I talk like this. I realized that there are people who are in the midst, something's tugging at their heart, and they have no one to help them understand what the tug is and how to be faithful to it, because it's delicate and it's innermost. And that's when I wrote Merton's Palace of Nowhere, and on how to be I was married, my daughters were small, we lived in Cleveland, Ohio. And I also tell this story that when I was writing Merton's Palace of Nowhere, how to discover your ultimate identity in God, I was having a hard time with it. So I wrote a letter to Dan Walsh, who taught philosophy at the monastery. And I said, I'm having a hard time communicating this to people out here, that we subsist in God like light subsists in flame. And he wrote back to me, it really affected me. He said, you can't communicate it, but it will communicate itself through you if you're convinced in what you say and if you are what you say. And it'll be communicating itself because something very deep in the listener will know it's being addressed. See, Merton called this spiritual communication. It's a communal realization and a quickening of what no one in the room can explain this way. And I found that to be very close when I became a psychotherapist. On the depth dimension of psychotherapy is that language this way for me. And so what I find then for us in the world, living out, we have to grow where we're planted. And there is this desire in our heart, that's why we're here. And we can't make these moments of awakening happen. The serendipity of it all, it flashes forth, it glimmers and shines here and there. And this is the importance of prayer. Prayer is fidelity to a daily rendezvous. See? And whatever is given to you, the long, slow walk, the whatever, but I want to talk about it as contemplative prayer, as guidelines for contemplative. And in the Turning to the Mystics podcast, there's a classic work in the Catholic mystical tradition called A Ladder of Monks. And there's 4 conferences on this in the podcast, but I'm going to summarize it here. 12th century Carthusian hermit, A Ladder of Monks. Here's the guidelines for prayer. First of all, it's important to do it every day, or most every day, because it's a habit that's formed in time, because it's subtle. The intensity and density of the challenge of the day closes off the delicacy of it. Thomas Merton once said, sometimes it is as if we're waiting for God to zap us with a big experience. They have to prop you up in a corner and fan you. And that happens, by the way. That happens. That can happen to people. But usually it's the opposite. We're trying to calibrate our heart to a fine enough scale to pick up the subtlety of this love. That which is essential never imposes itself. That which is unessential is constantly imposing itself. And that which is essential is a love that never dies, giving itself to you that will never die. See? And it never imposes itself. The unessential, which is that which is endlessly passing away, is always imposing itself. But to a desire of your heart, you can choose an inner fidelity to that which doesn't impose itself, and that's prayer. And so here are some guidelines for prayer, practical guidelines. You can see how it fits you. We're at the edge of spiritual direction here. You have to apply it to your life. First, some guidelines on attitude from Thomas Merton. First is sincerity, to be sincere. Thomas Merton once said, with God, a little sincerity goes a long, long way. Here I am, Lord. And then God says to you, well, here I am. We got something going this way. Next, to know that when it comes to God, to understand is to realize you're infinitely understood. That's the thing. So those who love those who love us in our life are sacraments of God's love for us in our life. Father, mother, sister, brother, like that. Where would we be without the people in our life who would see a value in us we couldn't yet see and see it to this day? And sometimes it's our turn to show it to them this way. And that's the presence of God and the presence of each other. Sometimes people in their own brokenness are the very people that traumatize us. A little girl cannot give herself the experience of her own preciousness. She has to see it mirrored in her in her parents' eyes. But what do you do when the very one you depend on to mirror back your preciousness is the one who's incesting you? We're beating you. We're shaming you this way. And what you do is you internalize their inability to see your preciousness becomes your inability to see the preciousness of yourself. See? This way, this is trauma. And then you ritualistically act it out in different ways, in different patterns this way. And so from this standpoint, it goes like this. If my father was a violent alcoholic, I'm not who my father said I was. My mother said I was. Matter of fact, as far as that goes, I'm not who my boss said I was, my pastor said I was. So I'm really not who I say I am. But God, can I join you in who you know me to be before the origins of the universe as your beloved? And that's why I pray. I'm sitting here in prayer so that I might learn from you who you know me to be, hidden with Christ in God. See, as your beloved in love. That's why I'm here. And so these are the guidelines for how it typically starts with Lectio Divina, discursive meditation and prayer. You would sit in discursive meditation, and Guido II, who wrote The Ladder of Monks, he said, there is a ladder that stretches from earth to heaven, and the ladder has 4 rungs on it. Each rung of the ladder is a graced state of consciousness, like an evolving state of consciousness. So you step on the first rung of the ladder, and the first rung of the ladder is Lectio Divina, and this is Lectio Divina. You hear a word like you open the scriptures, or it could be a mystic, whatever it is. But in the words of the person, you can hear God speaking to you in those words. This is Lectio. So for example, the example I use is so when Jesus says, fear not, I'm with you always. And as you open it in Lectio Divina, in receptive openness, as you listen to, you believe that you can hear God actually speaking to you in that moment, asking you not to be afraid, that God's with you always. It's personal. It's real. God's right there, echoing in those words, talking to you as you read it in the scriptures. The living God is talking to you, asking you not to be afraid. Do not be afraid this way. I'm with you always. And so Lectio Divina is sustained attentiveness. Even before you think about it, you already know that it's beautiful. And you know that it's beautiful because you know that it's true. And we don't spend enough time on the first rung, you know. And we need to spend more time in sustained receptivity to the beauty not yet thought about. That's the first rung of the ladder. Second rung, discursive meditation. God says, I talk to you, now you talk to me. Where are you at with this? Really? And this is where you might journal. You have to write off on it, like because that's what counts. It's your life, this way. And so it would go like this. I'm gonna do discursive meditation out loud with you. I'm going to be talking to God. You say, fear not, I'm with you always. But Jesus, you were afraid. In the Garden of Gethsemane, you sweat blood, trauma. You were afraid. So is it that you're asking me not to be afraid when scary things happen? This is where you're reflecting. Or are you asking me not to be afraid of being afraid? Are you asking me to be aware of your presence in my fear? I know it can be traumatizing. I can be flooded by it and all that. But are you asking me to calibrate a certain tenderness toward myself in my fear, to sense your presence and oneness in me in my fear? Because you were afraid. See? And because you were afraid, you're one with me in my fear this way. Because I am afraid, but I'm not just afraid. I am afraid, but with your help, I'm learning to know that your oneness with me in my fear. Notice, by the way, Jesus, I notice you're also saying, Jesus, you're not saying, don't be afraid. I'll personally see to it nothing unfair happens to you. I'll keep an eye out for you. You're going to be just fine. And look what happened to you. You got crucified, for Christ's sake. I mean, talk about an advertisement for a good path to follow. I mean, Jesus. So, see, so it isn't that you're going to protect me from the bad thing happening, but you're asking me to see, no matter how bad the bad thing gets, you're one with me in it. See, what's that? See, what is that? Is that it? This way. And I also think when we sit in prayer, if we're sincere this way, it rings true. What you're doing is you're being attentive to your own attentive heart. And you're calibrating your heart to be true to sensitivities that in the grace of God's oneness in your life that you know are true. See? And then you realize this, that when you sit this way, you realize in some way you're becoming more aware of what you already know. See? But we forget it. See? In some level in ourselves, we know that God is one with us in our fear, but we forget it this way. So how can I learn not to forget what my heart knows is true this way? This is like spiritual direction with yourself. See? And if you go to a spiritual director, this is what happens in direction too, I think, this way. And you know that you're one with me in it. Next, the heart is prayer. There's a third rung of the ladder, which is the desire from the heart. Help me with this, because I cannot deepen my experience of your oneness with me unless you'd help me deepen it. I can't. This way. And here's something else that's important. It's asking something out of me. It's asking something, because I'm living my life here today, and things are going on. Things are going on with me. Things you understand infinitely more than I do. But how can I take the light of this sincerity and let it shed light on the things that are going on within me and in my heart, and God, so that I can walk my walk and be with you this way? And then when you end the prayer, ask God for the grace not to break the thread of that sensitivity as you go through the day, and you head out. And you discover the thread breaks many times. Rush hour traffic. I mean, you know. But here's the thing. Little by little by little, you discover no matter how often it breaks from your end, it never breaks from God's end. See? Because God's with you always, unexplainably forever, finding you and one with you this way. Finding the one lost sheep, and that's you this way. And little by little, as the days and weeks and years go by, if you're faithful to your practice will be faithful to you. And it ripens over time as a more spiritually grounded, infinitely loved broken person in the midst of the world, and you carry it through the day. So there is in contemplative spirituality, I think, kind of three foundational aspects that this stands on this way. One aspect is practice, the prayer. Find your practice and practice it. The next one is to find the teaching and follow it. And the third is find your community and enter it. The practice is any act entered into with your whole heart that takes you to your deeper place. There's your practice. If there's no practice, it's just words. Thomas Merton said, we don't need more people to write more books on prayer. We're sitting at the fireside, sipping a little Cabernet, underlining beautiful passages in Thomas Merton's books. We don't need more of that. It's fine. But do you ever close the book and talk to God and listen to God talking to you and walk it in your heart? And that's practice. You practice your practice. It's an act of engagement. And Teresa of Avila, she talks about a state of absorption. She said absorption isn't divine union. It's a kind of quiet fascination with interior matters of love that you can tell matter very much. And so fidelity to the practice is fidelity to the state of absorption in this kind of sustained attentiveness. To find the teaching is to find the teaching that bears witness to I'm doing it now. This is teaching. The teaching is the teaching that bears witness to the infinite love of God. Ultimately speaking, just one thing is happening. The infinite presence of God is presencing herself. That is, she's infinitely pouring the infinity of her presence out and giving itself away whole and complete in and as the intimate immediacy of the gift and the miracle of your very presence in your nothingness without God. That's what's happening this way. See? Yeah, see? And so the teaching is a teaching that teaches that. And secondly, offers guidance in it. And that's what this is what the mystics are doing. See, how do I hear the teaching, which is the depth dimension of the gospel, the Psalms, whatever. In Kentucky, they don't have, do you know lightning bugs? You ever see fireflies? In Ohio, they had them out in the summer, and you see them, they light up like this. In Kentucky, it's too arid here. They don't have them. And one of them, in the monastery, the monks, when they chant the Psalms in choir, they face each other, and they chant back and forth. At the end of each psalm, they all bow over, glory be to the Father, and they chant. And he says, wouldn't it be something if we were all chanting like this, and we're chanting a verse in the psalm, which is God's own voice talking to us. Beside restful waters, you lead me. And what if we were struck by it, and we would light up like a lightning bug? So when you looked at the choir, you'd see these monks glowing on and off. So I think interiorly that does happen this way. And so there is that in which we light up inside, and we sit in the soft glow of it, like an interior luminosity that the finite eyes can't see, but the heart learns to trust it and to live by it. So it offers guidance in how to cultivate ever more habitual fidelity to this thing as you go through your day this way. And community, see, is just one other, first main community is God. Also, it's just one other person in whose presence you know you're not alone on this path. By the way, look around the room. Kindred spirits. Everyone here came here out of an utterly unique place. But it's the affinity of a shared desire. See? And so it's the gift of being together this way. So when I used to lead the contemplative prayer group over here every other Thursday for years, really, whatever, we would always start out with a teaching. I would spend a year on a mystic. I would speak for half an hour, the way I talk now. Then everyone would leave the room. We would turn out the lights, like candles around the room. We'd all enter the room and bow at the door as we enter. And when everyone was in the room, we'd all bow, and I'd ring the bell. We'd all sit for 20 minutes. Then we would do walking meditation around the room, real slow, contemplation and action. And then That's practice. And then we would do 20 more minutes of sitting meditation this way. So you have the teaching, see, then you have the practice, and we are the community. See? Little by little by little, what happens over time is all life becomes practice. And little by little, over time, all life becomes teaching. See, there is no lack of guidance in our life. There's only a lack of the awareness of the guidance being given, that life is our teacher. Listen very deeply to the depths of your life and what it's asking out of you to face and to walk through. And it's your life this way. And so you have, so the community then, it widens out so that all life becomes practice. You're being caught constantly, and you discover that the world becomes your community. God so loved the world that he sent his only begotten Son. See, this is this world. And we're woven into it unexplainably with the pain of it, the joy of it, and walk with it. And where are we with this? Sometimes when we hear something on the news, whatever, where we watch something, a good question to ask would be this. How would Jesus understand this, what this person's doing right now? What would be their understanding? And what would Jesus' understanding be of the person who's saying it? Because God's infinitely in love with that person who's saying it. But the things that they're saying might not at all be faithful to who they're called to be by that love. What would the understanding? What would Jesus' attitude be toward what they're saying? And what would Jesus' attitude be toward the one who's saying it? And what would Jesus say? What act is this asking out of me interiorly to respond, to engage with God's presence in the real world as it really is, like this? So this is it, really. And so right now, what I'm doing right now is I'm sharing with you the fruits of my Lectio, because I've sat with this for a long time. I'm sharing with you really, then this is my meditatio. This is my meditatio. And this meditatio is I'm praying right now. This is a kind of a prayer. So you can go off on your own, and you can't wait to get started. You're already into it. You light that candle and get mystical union or bust. And now what happens is this can start to become mystical. That's what I want to talk about next, about mystical prayer. This is the way I share it with Father Richard Rohr 2 years ago. Let's say you're living this devotional life like this in prayer. And I'm going to be God talking. No, I'm going to be God talking. Isn't this wonderful how close you and I are becoming with each other? I've always been one with you, but you've not nearly been so one with me. And I hope you're into this as much as I am, because we're an item. Really. I'm into you. You're my beloved. Seriously. But I want you to notice something. This is you becoming one with me on your terms. I mean, I know it's my terms. You want to do my will. I appreciate that. I mean, seriously. But this is you finding me in your beliefs, in your convictions, in your aspirations, in your ministry, which is great. I mean, it's fine. Seriously. But I want you to know something, please. Very, very soon now, it won't be like this for you. Because very, very soon now, you'll be dead. And for all of eternity, we'll be one with each other on my terms. And I can hardly wait to see the look of surprise on your face. Seriously. Because it's infinite. And I want to make you an offer. How would you like to not wait until you're dead for us to be one with each other on my terms? And before you answer, I ought to explain to you two things first. First, you're not going to be able to do this. The survival instinct is too strong. You can't do it. Secondly, you can depend on me to make your life explainably unmanageable. In the imperative of a longing that you're going to be powerless to consummate, Thomas, St. John of the Cross says, to have no light to guide you except the one that burns in your heart. See, this way. And so you can, I won't let you down. I'll keep it unmanageable. I won't let you live on your terms this way. What do you think? It's up to you. And you go, well, this is you. You go, I'll get back to you. See, and then, but here's the real thing. In your heart, you know it's already started. See, that's the thing. The very love, which is beyond what you're able to manage, is the love. It's already making its move on you. And it stirs in your heart with a longing that calls you to a surrender. So now the question is this. What kind of prayer embodies fidelity to that longing? Does this make sense in a way? There is my lectio, there is my meditation, there is my prayer. See? But it reaches a certain height. This is how Guido puts it in Ladder to Heaven. It reaches a certain height, he says, of an unbearable longing that your finite abilities can't consummate. And God's the author of that unbearable longing. See? And so the longing gets stronger and stronger and stronger, and you're powerless to consummate it. And then there's a boundary crossing. God crosses over and consummates the longing that you can't consummate in a oneness where you and God mutually disappear as dualistically other than each other, unexplainably forever in your heart. And when the moment is over, sometimes it can last for 20 minutes, 30 minutes. Sometimes it's like a flash, like a taste this way. And when it's over, how I experience this is it's when it's over, it's like you fall backwards in slow motion. And you fall back and you're sitting there in your room, the scriptures open on your lap, the candles burning, the tear-stained page. See? And you're sitting there in your ordinariness this way. But here's the thing. At any given moment, you know by experience it can catch fire. And as you return back to the verse in the psalm, you kind of go out and fix dinner, you know these are rituals or patterns of the day like this. You know, what if, another way I put it, see, what if God's the infinity of the rhythms of the day? That is, what if God's oneness with you is the infinity of breathing in and breathing out, standing up and sitting down, waking up and going to sleep? What if God's the infinity of those patterns? It's like God forever comes to visit, but we're rarely at home. Probably out buying a spiritual book or something, underlining passages, thing this way. But you can be blindsided by a tenderness in your heart that grazes you with a longing this way. And so I'd like to talk about how the mystics talk about this, because they say it can be happening for quite some time and you don't know that it's happening because it's subtle. It's subtle. So I'd like to give some examples of this. Saint Teresa of Avila, in her book The Interior Castle, great mystic, Interior Castle. And she was asked to write a book on prayer. And she said it came to her, so she needs a metaphor to put words to explore this. And she said it came to her like the soul, that your soul is like a castle made of diamond or crystal, like a huge castle. And in a way, by her soul, she means the interiority of ourself. You know, when something's very soulful, she means that. But deeper down, by her soul, she means who you are as a person created by God in the image and likeness of God. She says some people don't even know they have a soul. They're so caught up by the demands of the external world, you know, and they don't even. But she says what happens? There's a quickening, love found or love lost. There's like a quickening event, and it dawns on you: if love has an outside, it must have an inside. And you find your way into the interiority of your soul. And imagine 7 concentric circles going out like this. And the 7th circle is God in the innermost hidden center. So each one goes out like this. So the very first mansion of your soul, when you first stumble in, see, is the very first mansion of your soul. And it's the very first place where God becomes personally real to you. So when Jesus says, follow me, you listen and say, help me to do this, Lord. This is the first mansion. You're very sincere on God's oneness with you in your heart. And it's a gift to be in the first mansion. You can remember maybe there was a time that you weren't there. You might know people that aren't in the first mansion. See? She says, but here's the challenge of the first mansion. You discover you were careless when you got in, and reptiles got in with you. Reptiles are habits of the mind and heart that compromise the love that you know you're called to be faithful to. See? You know what it's like this. And you're not yet finished with the patterns that compromise the love. It goes on and on and on. And so you work with it. Devotional sincerity, you keep doing your best with God's help and grow. And it's just as you keep going, you find a door. And the door leads into the second mansion, which gets closer to the center. And the door has 3 hinges on it: humility, prayer, and self-knowledge. And you get into the second mansion, and it's deeper in the second mansion, but it's more precarious. And here's what the second mansion is. It isn't you were careless and the reptiles got in. You're raising them as pets. That is to say, you slip out at night and you're dating them. That is, you're traumatically bonded to the patterns that compromise the truth of your heart this way. And I think this is where psychotherapy touches spirituality. These patterns are often patterns formed, survival patterns formed in trauma and abandonment. See? Because I raged, I lived. Because I rage, I live. Because I gave external compliance to avoid being attacked or abandoned, I lived. Because I give external compliance to avoid being attacked or abandoned, I lived. Because I succeeded and worked very hard in achieving in school and success, I lived. Because I'm as successful, I live. You know what the litany's like. It's an internalized survival pattern formed in trauma and abandonment, in trauma of your heart. So with God's help, really, you start to seek to look at this in the light of Jesus, about mercy, about love, about tenderness, about vulnerability, about truthfulness, and so on. And as you keep walking the walk in discipleship in your life, you find a door that leads to the third mansion. And the third mansion is psychological spiritual maturity. You kind of reach cruising altitude. You're not as chaotic as you used to be. You're not as duplicitous as you used to be. There's a kind of a psychological, spiritually grounded, you still work to do, but you know that God's mercy's with you in the work, and you're a third mansion the world could use more third mansion people this way. It's a gift. It's a gift. And she says, but from the ultimate point of view, there's a difficulty with third mansion people. It's entirely too reasonable. That is, reason has not yet been conquered by love. See? She said people in the third mansion, they do go sailing, they do pray, but they're always careful to keep the shore in view. They're always circling back around, see, to check in with yourself this way. Here's an image I have. See, I'll show the fourth mansion, how she says it first. Here's the fourth mansion. And what she's helping you to see is an event that's maybe happening to you, but it's so subtle, you haven't noticed it or it's significant. She says, you're sitting there in prayer. The scriptures are open. So you're sitting there in prayer. And she said, in the first 3 mansions, she compares God to water. And she said, the presence of God is cultivated through effort, to avoid distractions, to be renewed, to be sincere. And the effort's important. It's real. And it seems to be coming from somewhere far off. And through your prayer, you're drawing God in. She says, but as you sit there, 2 things start to happen. You begin to sense that the presence of God is flowing into you without effort from some hidden place deep within and beyond yourself. And furthermore, she says, imagine a basin filling with water, and the basin overflows. But what if there was a basin when the water kept flowing in? Instead of overflowing, it kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger to accommodate the water. And she says, you realize that's what's happening to your heart. You're sitting there, it's utterly ordinary, but you realize your heart's being expanded to divine proportions. and you surrender to it. This way. See? Or you realize maybe she says you're afraid to surrender to it. And you talk to God, and God says, I know you're afraid. Don't worry. It's okay. Don't go faster than you're able to go. You'll get traumatized. See? Back off. Relax. And as you keep relaxing, your heart expands more. See? And that's the fourth mansion. And that's the beginning of the mystical. This way, I think. John of the Cross puts it differently. Teresa and John were kind of mystics together in the Spanish tradition. St. John of the Cross says, you're living your day-by-day life, discipleship, following Jesus, and so efficacious unto holiness. She said these mystical favors that get deeper and deeper and deeper. She says there are some people that don't have any of them, and they're holier than people who have a lot of them. Because holiness is to do God's will, which is to live by love. But if it's your charism, if it's your way to be surrendered to love, this is your, you know what I mean? This is your calling. It's your way to be faithful to it. So John of the Cross puts it this way. He says you're going along, you're saying your prayers, and you look for 3 signs start to happen to you. The first sign is that prayer is no longer consoling to you. This way. Like you show up for the rendezvous with God, and God doesn't show up for the rendezvous. Spiritual aridity or emptiness. John of the Cross says, maybe the aridity is due to infidelities in your life. It shows up in prayer. And so you check it out and say, no more sinful than usual. I don't think that's it. Go on. Another thing he says, maybe the aridity, he said it's due to a bile, in your bile or your brain. In other words, what he's really saying is maybe you're depressed. So you think you're becoming a mystic. In the dark, here you're just depressed. By the way, could you be in the dark night and depressed? You could. Sure you could. Sure you could. Absolutely. And so I used to do therapy in this office. They had a little bulletin board in the waiting room. There was a little cartoon. And the cartoon says, one person says to the other, you know, for years, I've been seeking the solace and consolation of God. I've gone on retreats, I've read spiritual books, I've meditated, I've prayed, I chant, I do nothing. She said, this morning when I woke up, he says, I woke up with a sense of the consolation of God. And the other person said, about 2 weeks ago, I started putting Prozac in your coffee. See, what's one of the signs of depression? Ahedonia, the difficulty in being pleasured this way. Another one is difficulty in concentrating this way. I used to give a talk in Los Angeles for Training Center for Spiritual Directors on how to discern depression from the dark night of the soul. See? They're distinct, but they're different. Someone's going through the dark night, you don't give them Prozac for the dark night. See? But likewise, someone who's major depression, you don't have them read John of the Cross, they'd probably kill themselves. And then John of the Cross says this. He said, here's the thing. He said, actually, in the darkness of the night, your finite eyes are being blinded by an infinite light. God sees that you become too attached to finite ways of experiencing the love of God, consolations, insights, and so on. So God lovingly takes away the ability to be consoled. Back in the good old days when you were holy, it was so clear. You're not even sure anymore even what it believes in God anymore. Like you're starting to lose your way on your terms. And then John of the Cross says, O night lovelier than the dawn. The shining of this light into your heart, and you learn to live by it in the interiority of your life. And this is the teaching of St. John of the Cross this way. So I'd like to share with you a way that I learned to practice this at the monastery. And then we'll do a little sit and have a dialogue and see where it goes. It's the I love you prayer. And this is kind of a combination of the cloud of unknowing and Buddhism and different things. The prayer is this. You sit very still in a very sincere way. And when you inhale, listen to God interiorly inhaling the presence of God into you as God's beloved. So when you're inhaling, you can listen to God exhaling the infinity of herself into you as the beloved. And when you exhale yourself in love to the love that in the next inhalation is going to give itself to you. For in the reciprocity of love, destiny is fulfilled. I love you, I love you, I love you, I love you. Now, as you sit this way, what you'll start to notice is that maybe there's something going on in your life that saddens you. And no wonder it's sad. It saddens you. So as you sit there, when you inhale, listen to God exhaling the infinity of love into you, sadness and all. Finding no obstacle in your sadness to being infinitely in love with you in your sadness. And when you exhale yourself sadness and all into the love that's infinitely in love with you in the midst of your sadness. Maybe you're sitting there in life, there's something you're afraid of because of an uncertain outcome of something that you just dread that it's going to go in some very painful, and it might, by the way. So when you inhale, listen to God, exhaling the infinity of herself, fear and all, finding no obstacle in your fear to being infinitely in love with you. And when you exhale yourself in love, fear and all, to the love that the next inhalation is going to love you, fear and all. And little by little by little, or all at once, you discover that love and love alone is a substantiality of reality itself. It's not, notice this, that God is a presence that protects us from nothing, even as God unexplainably sustains us in all things. If you know, look what happened to him. The cross, for God's sakes. And little by little by little, one can learn to be free from the tyranny of fear in the midst of fear, free from the tyranny of regret in the midst of regret, on and on and on and on this way. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross did studies on the stages of dying, a terminal diagnosis, and interviewing thousands of patients, terminal patients. She found that the person goes through these stages. First, there's denial. You don't believe that it actually applies to you. And then when you realize it is terminal, she says the next stage is denial. Excuse me, the next stage is bargaining. You strike a deal with God. If you let me live, I will read Thomas Merton every day and won't procrastinate and say mean things to my aunt, please. And then when you find the bargaining doesn't work, when the bargaining doesn't work, she said, then you go from there into anger. And then when the anger doesn't work, you go into depression. She said, this is the ego coming to the end of itself. She says, some people come to acceptance. She said, not everybody comes to acceptance. I'm thinking of Maureen when she was dying. She died in the living room at home in house hospice from Alzheimer's. She says, you look into the face of the dying loved one, and their face is the gate of heaven. It's freedom from the tyranny of death in the midst of death this way. And you know it's an echo of your own face that you're called to live this way, like this. And so this I love you, I love you, I love you is the substantiality of love that transcends and permeates the realities of our day, standing up and sitting down, and being one day at a time who we so unexplainably are. And here's something else I would say. Being surprised, but when you live this way, that you're becoming someone in whose presence others are better able to get a sense. You pass on the contagious energy of love by the way you listen to them, by the way you're real with them, by the way you're attentive to them. See? Or maybe they don't. Same thing this way. But you realize that sometimes it's your turn, see, out of your own vulnerability, to touch the heart of somebody in some unexplainable way. See? You know, sometimes you might pass somebody on the street and they have this lost look in their eyes. And you stop and ask them, "Are you okay?" Without realizing maybe you saved their life. This way. That we're all here for each other and with each other this way. So let's stand and stretch for a minute. And again, whatever you do when you sit with God, sit with God. But the tone of this thing about prayer and all of it, how does it strike you? What sits with you? What questions does it raise in your mind? All this. Okay, so you can be seated. Oh, I want to share one more thing. You can either take this literally or poetically to make a point. Imagine you go to your room an hour before sunset. And imagine your only goal in going there is to be with God while it gets dark. If you go there for any other reason, to have an insight, you might or might not happen. To be virtuous, you might or not be virtuous. To solve something, you might or not. But if you go there to be with God when it gets dark, make it every night. And when you go to be with God while it gets dark, notice God's been with you every night since the day you were born. And God could so excited to see you coming. Where you been? I've been right here, like this. And you close the door, take off your shoes, put a pillow up against the wall facing an open window, sit down on the floor, kind of situated to put your head back against the wall and settle in and sit there for one full hour after it gets completely dark. So it's going to take an hour to get dark. You're going to be there for 2 hours sitting on the floor with your head back against the wall. Don't take with you a book on how to be with God while it gets dark and 10 easy lessons. Don't put on any how to be with God while it gets dark mood music. Don't light any how to be with God incense. It's just me. And you'll discover yourself in your mind running away from the sovereignty of day's end. God's the infinity of that sovereignty. No one slows it up and no one speeds it down this way and sit this way like that. See? After one full hour after it's been dark, you know, you've been bored 10,000 times. Your head hurts, your back hurts, your butt hurts, your legs hurt. You sit there empty-handed, and you look around the room, and the shadowy outline of things, it might be the very first time you were present in your own room like this. Your own shoes sitting by the door, maybe a coffee cup with a teaspoon in it, the 2 books sitting at the edge of a table. How unexplainably holy everything is in the simplicity of its presence. Another related image. Imagine you're dying in the middle of the night, and you know that you're dying. And you turn and you look at the flowers silhouetted in the windowsill, silhouetted in the moonlight. They seem to know all about it, like this. We fear it so, but it is our homeland. It's boundaryless in emptiness, virginal, pure. It unravels us unexplainably like this. And so I think there's the call in our prayer to kind of, we can feel ourselves being drawn to these sensibilities and these things. And so we each are present to God. Or let's put it another way. Maybe not. Maybe you're just sitting there getting used to Lectio Divina. Same thing. God isn't going, "It's so great you're learning Lectio Divina," but when you really get serious and become a mystic, we'll talk. You sitting there in Lectio Divina, God's infinitely in love with you, and the miracle that you're sincerely sitting there with Lectio Divina because you're the beloved. That's what counts this way. So with that said, I want you to fold your hands and bow. Bow. Okay, if we could put the microphone back here. Thank you. So let's say at least for the next 20 minutes, maybe a quarter till, something long, have a dialogue, like a chat. We'll chat, we'll have a talk. So anyone with any questions or concerns or observations you'd want to share, you can come forward. There you go for it. Go ahead, yes.
Hi.
Hi.
My thoughts are around spiritual bypass and injustice. Particularly my injustices that happen to me, but then the incredible anger I have towards injustice in the world,
All right.
and how to reconcile that.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, the question is about injustice in the world and spiritual bypassing. And here's something that I'm picking up from this. Could we, by our devotion to prayer, be bypassing the suffering of the world? I'm a mystic in the making, and I'm out of here. See? And that is a seduction. That is a seduction. Some people can't do that, by the way. And by the way, also, I say this psychologically in trauma. If that's what's helping them get through the day, good for them. See? It's better than falling apart. See? But can you be found a more reality-based, broad-based way to be present in the world and not use spirituality as a flight from the world of the suffering or your own suffering? Secondly, but when it's authentic, this search for God, it radicalizes our presence in the world. I want to give an example of this from me. Well, Marina and I we were both psychotherapists, and we live in Marina Del Rey, and we had a therapy officer in Santa Monica. And we were driving to the office. We saw patients from therapy from noon till 9 at night. And we were stopping at a red light, and there was a woman going from car to car with a styrofoam cup begging for money. And off the side of the curb, I could see a grocery cart with all her belongings piled up. And when she got to our car, Maureen put the window down and gave her $1. And when the woman reached out to take the $1, we saw she had no hands. She had deformed fingers like this on her shortened arms, and she took, she spoke perfect English. She had long black hair. And the woman said, "Thank you." And Maureen said, "You're welcome. Have a good day." She said, "You too." We drove on, put the window up. Maureen said, "I wonder what kind of good day you have when you have no home and you have no hands." I said, "That's right, and just think, she's not one of hundreds, but thousands and thousands and thousands of people all over the world that are living in conditions like, and a lot of them are going to die in those conditions. They're going to die that way today, this way." Then I realized we were going to our office to work with trauma survivors. They had a home and they had hands, but they couldn't abide themselves, see, of internalized trauma and loss and dissociating and splitting and I'm a trauma survivor myself. I know it well this way. See? And what happened, I found myself shutting down. I was getting in touch with too much suffering at once. See? And the people were going to be counting on me not to do that this way. See? And so I had to find within myself a place of depth that transcends the suffering, that gives me the grounded place how to be present to it. And the image that I use in my mind, when I'm sitting there as a therapist, I'm in the circle of the healing circle. The person sitting on the sofa, they're in their suffering circle, and the two circles are touching each other. If I'm completely clinical, they'll sense the detachment, that they're alone. I have to be willing to take one of my feet in transcendence and put it into their circle so they can tell that I'm with them this way. See? Because if they're not with them, they're alone. But here's the next thing. Because I'm a trauma survivor, if they start sharing trauma that's too close to my own trauma, and I start getting overwhelmed, I owe it to interiorly back away. So when I would look out the window of my office, there was a telephone wire outside the window this way, and I would count the birds on the telephone wire. Or they thought I would be taking session notes, I'd be writing a grocery list this way. Because I needed to back away enough to stay grounded so that I didn't get flooded. So that when I got flooded, I could step back into their circle again. And as I did that over and over and over again, then they could, some people would say this in therapy to me sometimes, I feel so safe in here. And I'll say, yes, notice, but I'm not doing anything to you. I think what happens, you're more present to yourself in my presence. That's why you feel safer in here. And I think little by little by little, if you can be more present to yourself in my presence, you can be more present to yourself when you're not in my presence. And you can find your way home to yourself by walking this courageous walk through your suffering this way. So in a way, yes, it can be spiritual bypassing. But another way, if we let it, it's the grounded place out of which we face the suffering in ourselves and world, as it's given to us to face it. You know? So, for example, I've never been involved in social issues. It's not given to me. It's my concern this way. It just isn't given me to do that. But I do face a traumatized world one person at a time in therapy for 30 years. See? And so you have to find your way to be authentically present to the suffering of the world. And I think that's what counts, and be aware of that.
Thank you. I'm at the beginning of my spiritual journey, and I'm curious. When I think of meditation, I think of being quiet. When I think of prayer, I think of it being vocal. What is the difference to you between prayer and meditation, and how are they interrelated?
That's good. Let's say in vocal prayer, like saying our prayers. Or when I was in the monastery, the monks chanting the Psalms, back and forth. Is that when we're praying, in our prayer, we're talking to God when we pray. And we're talking to God in response because we've heard God talking to us this way. See? And that's the prayer, that's vocal prayer. I'll give an example for married love, too, if I would. If one says to the other, I love you, the other person doesn't say, define your terms. Or, I had no idea, let me write that down. Do you have any books on that? Really? Richard Rohr says, how to turn communication into transformation. They don't say, I love you. Or the person doesn't say this, you're so redundant. You say that every day. I want to hear something new tomorrow. I mean it. Seriously. It's not like that, is it? No, it isn't. Why did they say it? Hopefully. They say it because every time they say it, it recreates the possibility of being reawakened to the love that's beyond the words that they can say. See? Those are the words of lovers. It's also the words of poets and the cry of the poor. That's the living word, like a logos or a word. The silence is this, I would think, meditation. I think the silence, several ways of looking at silence. One, you can be in the presence of God in nature or loss or whatever it is. And you're moving along like this and you're silenced. St. Teresa puts it this way. She calls it the prayer of quiet. She said, you're sitting there in prayer. She said, you're not inclined to say anything. You're not inclined to ask anything. You're inclined to sit wordlessly in the presence of God beyond what words can say. And that's meditation. I skipped a step. There's discursive meditation, like we were doing earlier, not saying anything, but you're interiorly reflecting in the presence of God, on the presence of God in your life, discursive meditation. But it becomes contemplative, like the I love you, I love you. It's even beyond reflection this way. And I think those are the differences. And I think in real life, what happens, it's a charism. They all work together back and forth. And they're all woven together as aspects of a unitive mystery that we live out as it's given to us to live it, I think. Anyone else with anything? Let's do this. You come up first, and then you, and then you. We'll do these three. Just a minute. But you first. You first. Hi.
Hi, Jim.
Turn the mic a little bit down, just a little bit.
A little bit down.
There you go. Perfect. Okay.
Thank you. I came late because I was with the friend who needed me. And I walked in and you talked about the candles in the Thursday night meditation room. I lit those candles for years. I can't even remember how many years. And
You'd light a candle, like devotional candle?
the candles in the
Oh,
meditation.
yeah, when we would walk around. Oh, yeah.
That was my service.
Yeah.
But it was more than service. It was healing.
Yeah.
I was coming back to church after a bad divorce, and you healed me with the mystics. Yeah. And when I heard you talk about the candles, I had so much love and gratitude for what you've given to this community and the world, and to know you. I remember the times when you would forget your notes.
Yeah.
You'd come up the stairs and it would be, oh my God.
Yeah,
So,
very nice. Thank you. I'll
thank
respond.
you.
Yeah,
Yes,
I'll
thanks.
respond. I have some thoughts. She's talking about we would walk in the dark around these, we'd be vigil candles around the room, about the candles. Here's what I thought. St. John of the Cross says, to be held a prisoner by a hair that flutters on the neck of the beloved. He says that sometimes the smallest of things can pierce the heart. See, with the holiness of like the incomprehensible stature, the simplicity of something. See, and it grazes your heart and you see it this way. That's good. Yeah, that's very nice. It's a gift that we would sensitize to that. And another thing she said is, I would work on my talks all week, and I'd give a 30-minute talk on a mystic. And one particular week, a talk I was going to give, I thought was particularly profound. Really, I thought it was really good. And here, when I got to the church here, I realized I'd left my notes at home. I forgot my notes. And so I sat on the floor at the end of a hallway trying to remember what I could remember about my profound talk. And so when I was done with the talk and the dialogue afterwards, someone raised their hand and said, I think your talks go better when you lose your notes. And you know what I think it is? It's like a flow, like an intuitive flow I can't explain it. I think there's something to that, really. So anyway, that's what she's talking about. Somebody else was next. Who is next? 3 people. Yeah, I think it's you. Hi.
So, when you were talking about Christ and
Come a little closer to the mic.
when you were speaking about Christ and the devastation that he faced at the end of his death, and also St. John of the Cross and the other mystics that have had that injury and devastation, and then looking at the circumstances of our world right now, not that every minute, every hour, something isn't happening here, but across the world.
Yeah.
What do you imagine they would say about that, Christ and St. John of the Cross, having gone through that torture and pain?
Yeah, what would they say about the world, looking out at the world?
Yeah, and what we do about it. I mean, we can hold them in prayer and hope that that's doing something, and protect the innocent and relieve the suffering.
Right.
And get into the minds of the people who inflict it. And those are my prayers, but you never know what
Right.
effect that will have and what,
Right, yeah, yeah.
the wise would say about it.
Very good. Yes, yes, yes. You know, one way of looking at this spiritually, it's like the view from the cross. You know, it's like the view from the cross. You can look out at the world. Like, what's the world look like when you're hanging there, like that? And the response of Jesus to it, as he hangs there, is, Father, forgive them; they know not what they do. This way. And not only that, as he was hanging there, he lost his faith. My God, why have you forsaken me? See? He became our death. He became our loss. See? And then Father, into your hands I commend my spirit. He gave himself over to the God he could no longer find. And that's the sovereignty of love in the brokenness of this world, this way. See? And they say in the scriptures that when after Jesus died, they pierced his heart with a lance. Did I say this already? No, I don't think I did. I was just saying this with somebody. They pierced his heart with a lance, and blood and water flowed out, like at the birth of a child, which is us. See? And then there was no more Jesus left in Jesus. And then the only Jesus that was ever really there is manifested throughout the whole world to this day. And Jesus says, come follow me. See? Sounds like a great idea. Do you see where he's taking you? See? What is the cross? The cross is the cherished and dreaded illusions that anything less than an infinite union with the infinite love of God can put to rest the longings of our heart. Secondly, it's the illusion that the brokenness of this world, no matter how much it overtakes me and I become lost in it, can never separate me from the love of God that's present in my loss and is one with me in the loss forever this way. Put it another way, can I learn to die of love at the hands of love until nothing's left of me but love? And if I could learn that when the moment of my biological death comes, is it possible that nothing will happen? I mean, something will happen. I'll be dead. But I will have already crossed over. See, Thomas Merton once said, when I entered the monastery, this old lay brother died. It's the first time I ever saw a dead person, I remember. And he gave a talk to the novices about death. He said, it's very helpful to remember that when we die, we don't go anywhere when we die, like orbit the earth a few times and head out. He said, in God, we live and move and have our being. We're living our life in the vast interiority of God. All the angels are here. All the saints are here. All those who have crossed over into God are, we'll be joining them soon enough. See? And that's what contemplative prayer is. See, contemplative prayer is a soulful, quiet, realized thing that we're living our life in the interiority of God, in the presence of a suffering world, and to be present to it as best we can, as we're called to be present to it, see, and to walk our walk this way. Was there one more person? Yes.
So hi, when you gave us the image of getting into a room it's getting dark, and I want to be with God there, and
Talk a little louder, please.
Yeah, I imagined that I'm in this dark room and there is a window and I see the sky and it's beautiful. It's sunset, so it's colorful. And I'm trying to sense God in that darkness. But by looking at the window and seeing colors, I'm mesmerized by beauty. And as it gets darker and darker and darker, maybe there's only little glimpses of light from stars. But I notice that the room is really a chapel with more people in it.
Yeah.
And there are glimpses of love there that I can start seeing. But
maybe you can speak more of what can help us shift in the darkness, in injustice, in life, our attention to the beauty and the presence of love.
Right. Yes. I want to say something. This is like contemplative spiritual direction. See, once I was having these experiences in the monastery, and I was with Thomas Merton in the monastery, and I was telling him about this experience. And he said, once in a while, you'll find somebody with whom you can talk about such things, but they're hard to find. He says, some people don't even know about it. Others can tell you to put it off till later. And he had to know that he was the person with whom I could talk about such things. Because a lot of spiritual direction, I think, is like this person. You're trying to find words for an extremely delicate thing. You know what I mean? And it's in the attentiveness to know that it's heard and you're met like that. So I'd like to share an image of this for me that I shared. I put it in my memoir, I think. I can't remember. on exactly this kind of thing. Imagine you're sitting alone in a room, and the room's complete. It's a big room, say like this. And it's completely empty. There's no furniture. There's no windows. There's no pictures. The walls are all white. The ceiling is white. The floor is white. And there's no furniture in the room except the chair that you're sitting in the middle of the room. And also the room is lit up from an unseen light source. And you're facing one of the walls of the room and you're sitting there like that. And little by little, the light in the room gets dimmer and dimmer and dimmer. And as it gets dimmer and dimmer, the wall that you're facing, on the other side, a light lights up and starts illuminating the wall. And here it's like gossamer. It's like a tight cloth, gossamer. And the light on the other side of the room is shining through now into the darkness of the room. And on the other side of that gossamer screen, you can see God's over there. And the saints are over there. And the angels. And they can see that you can see them. And they're waving at you like this and laughing. And you're waving back. And then an amazing thing happens. They pass right through the screen. And they circle around you. Like this. You're kind of amazed. And then it gets even me. They pick you up and take you back to the wall and to the other side. And then they bring you back over. Then they bring you back over. See? And then you're sitting there in the chair. And all of a sudden, the light in the room gets brighter and brighter. And all of a sudden, you're just sitting there alone in the room. And you get up, and you go over and you touch the wall, and it really is a wall. But in your heart, you know there's no wall. See? You know there is a wall the body can't pass through. But there is a realm of endless interpenetration of the eternal and time of birth and death of the saints and the angels. And you learn to live in an ever more habitual understanding of the truth of that in your heart, which cannot be explained, but it can be intimately realized and lived by it as a gift in your heart. So, I'm finished.
Person. Thank you. We have mission coming up with a wonderful person in a couple of weeks, and we have also lots of other events during this time, retreats and things. Michael DiPaolo, where are you, Michael? You were good. Tell us a little bit about that retreat you're doing. Thank you, Michael. So, Jim, we love you. We're grateful to you. And please see that basket up there on that piano. Please support him. He needs the support of our community for his ministry. He does great work. So thank you all for coming this morning. Love you very much.